The Great Plains of North America were once home to millions of American bison. These vast grasslands stretched as far as the eye could see, providing a perfect habitat for these magnificent creatures. These majestic creatures roamed freely across the grasslands, grazing on the abundant vegetation and maintaining the ecological balance of the plains. For centuries, Native American tribes relied on the bison for their survival. The bison were not just a source of food, but were integral to their entire way of life. The bison provided them with food, clothing, shelter, and tools. Every part of the animal was used, ensuring nothing went to waste. The Native Americans had a deep spiritual connection with the bison. They believed that the bison were a gift from the Great Spirit and honored them in their ceremonies and rituals. They honored the animal in their ceremonies and stories, passing down legends and traditions through generations. The relationship between the Native Americans and the bison was one of respect and interdependence. They understood the importance of living in harmony with nature. The Native Americans only hunted what they needed, ensuring that the bison population remained sustainable. They used every part of the animal. Nothing was wasted, from the hides for clothing to the bones for tools. They lived in harmony with nature, understanding that their survival was intertwined with the health of the ecosystem. Their way of life ensured the survival of both the bison and their own people for generations. This delicate balance was maintained through mutual respect and understanding. The arrival of European settlers disrupted this delicate balance. The settlers hunted bison in vast numbers, often for sport or profit, without regard for the consequences. It marked the beginning of a dark chapter in the history of the American bison. The once thriving herds were decimated, and the way of life for the Native American tribes was forever changed. The arrival of European settlers in North America brought dramatic changes to the Great Plains. These settlers came in search of new opportunities, driven by the promise of land and wealth. They traveled vast distances, often enduring harsh conditions to reach their new homes. The settlers brought with them new diseases that devastated Native American populations. Smallpox, measles, and influenza spread rapidly, causing widespread suffering and death among indigenous communities who had no immunity to these foreign illnesses. They also brought with them a different view of the land. Unlike the Native Americans, who saw the land as a living entity to be respected and lived with harmoniously, the Europeans viewed it as a resource to be used and controlled. The Europeans saw the land as something to be conquered and exploited. They began to fence off large areas, cultivate crops, and build permanent settlements, fundamentally altering the landscape and ecosystem. This view was embodied in the concept of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was the belief that the United States was destined to expand across the continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. Manifest destiny was the belief that the United States was destined to expand across the continent. This ideology justified the westward expansion and the taking of lands from Native American tribes. This belief fueled westward expansion. Settlers moved westward in large numbers, traveling on routes like the Oregon Trail, driven by the promise of new land and opportunities. It led to the displacement and destruction of Native American tribes. Entire communities were forced to leave their ancestral lands, often facing long and brutal journeys to unfamiliar territories. The settlers began to hunt bison for their hides and meat. The bison, which were crucial to the way of life of many Native American tribes, were hunted to near extinction. They often left the carcasses to rot on the plains. This wasteful practice was not only environmentally damaging, but also deeply disrespectful to the Native Americans who relied on the bison for their survival. This wasteful practice shocked and angered the Native Americans. The loss of the bison herds was a devastating blow to their culture, economy, and way of life, leading to increased tensions and conflicts between the settlers and the indigenous peoples. As more settlers moved westward, conflicts with Native Americans intensified. The U.S. government sought ways to subdue the Native American tribes. They soon realized that the bison held the key to their strategy. The government adopted a policy of extermination. They understood that the bison were essential to the survival of the Native Americans. By eliminating the bison, they could weaken the Native Americans. This policy was encouraged and supported by the U.S. Army. The Army provided hunters with ammunition and supplies. They even used their own soldiers to hunt bison. The government also encouraged the construction of railroads across the Great Plains. This made it easier for hunters to access bison herds. The systematic slaughter of the bison was swift and devastating. Hunters armed with high-powered rifles killed bison by the thousands. They often shot them from moving trains. The once vast herds of bison began to dwindle. The plains were littered with rotting carcasses. The stench of death filled the air. The Native Americans were horrified by the wanton destruction. They were helpless to stop it. The loss of the bison was a crushing blow to their way of life. It led to starvation, poverty, and despair. By the late 1800s, the American bison was on the brink of extinction. Only a few hundred remained in the wild. With the bison nearly gone, the U.S. government found it easier to force Native Americans onto reservations. These reservations were often located on undesirable land. The Native Americans were stripped of their traditional hunting grounds and, well, they were forced to assimilate into American society. The loss of their way of life had a profound impact on their culture and identity. The reservation system confined Native Americans to a life of poverty and dependence. They were denied basic rights and freedoms. The government's policies toward Native Americans during this period were marked by cruelty and injustice. The legacy of this dark chapter in American history continues to haunt the nation. Section 6. A Glimmer of Hope, the Conservation Movement. As the 19th century came to a close, a growing awareness of the plight of the American bison began to emerge. Conservationists and concerned citizens recognized the need to save the species from extinction. They formed organizations dedicated to protecting the remaining bison. They lobbied the government for protection. They established wildlife refuges where bison could roam freely. The efforts of these early conservationists were instrumental in saving the American bison. They marked the beginning of a long and arduous journey toward recovery. Section 7. A Tale of Two Recoveries. Thanks to decades of dedicated conservation efforts, the American bison has made a truly remarkable comeback. Once on the brink of extinction, these majestic creatures have been brought back from the edge through the tireless work of conservationists and the implementation of protective measures. Today, there are an estimated 500,000 bison in North America. These animals now roam freely in national parks and protected reserves, a sight that was almost lost to history. While this is a far cry from the tens of millions that once roamed the plains, it is a testament to the power of conservation. The efforts to save the bison have shown that with commitment and action, we can make a difference. However, the recovery of the bison stands in stark contrast to the ongoing struggles of Native American communities. Despite their deep historical connection to the bison, many Native American communities continue to face significant challenges. While the bison have rebounded, Native Americans continue to face systemic poverty, discrimination, and health disparities. These issues are deeply rooted and have been perpetuated over generations. The trauma of their past continues to affect them today. The displacement and injustices faced by Native Americans have left lasting scars that are still evident in their communities. The contrast between the two recoveries is a stark reminder that conservation efforts must extend beyond the protection of species. It highlights the need for a more holistic approach that includes the well-being of human communities. They must also address the social and economic injustices that threaten the well-being of indigenous communities. Only then can we achieve true recovery and justice for all. Section 8. Lessons from the Brink. The near extinction of the American bison is a cautionary tale. It highlights the devastating consequences of environmental destruction and the importance of respecting indigenous cultures. The story of the bison teaches us that we are all connected to the natural world. Our actions have consequences. When we exploit and destroy nature, we harm ourselves. The bison's recovery also offers hope. It shows that we can reverse course and restore what we have lost. But it requires a collective effort, a commitment to sustainability, and a willingness to learn from the mistakes of the past. Section 9. The Future of Two Nations. The future of the American bison and Native American communities is intertwined. By supporting the revitalization of indigenous cultures and economies, we can help ensure the long-term survival of both. This includes supporting tribal sovereignty, promoting economic development on reservations, and preserving Native American languages and traditions. It also means recognizing the important role that Native Americans play in conservation efforts. The story of the American bison is a story of resilience, both for the animal and the people who have long depended on it. By learning from the past and working together, we can create a future where both the bison and Native American communities can thrive.